we've got a good set of questions here about monetization. We've got a good panel representing B2C and B2B from a bunch of different walks of life. So I think this should make for a very interesting panel. I'm really happy to have all you guys here. So the way we're going to kick this off is, I think we can just go through and you guys can quickly introduce yourselves. Alexey?
Thanks. I will start, but I think that my role is secondary today because I work primarily in B2B field. That's why I'm one out of 5 people here wearing a tie today, I think. And we are working providing VR experiences and 3D content for real estate markets. It's quite a big niche, and I think that it's interesting in a long-term perspective, but we have more than 5 years of experience working as an automated platform and more than 3 years experience of selling VR to real estate market. And I think that we have some fruitful observations which I hope to share with you today. But as I said, I think that B2B is just one small part of different monetization types, and I hope that my colleagues will show more than I am able to do today.
Hi guys, my name is Harri. I run Nordic VR startups here in Helsinki. We are an accelerator. We invest in Nordic VR and AR startups, as our name is. I'm not wearing a tie, as you can see. Even though, you know, I run an accelerator, I do invest in companies. We started this summer our first batch. It's a joint venture between Gumi and Nordic Film, which is a local entertainment and media company. And the first batch that started, we got 70 applications, and we started off with 6 companies. So been seeing a lot of VR, AR startups in the last 6 months, and happy to talk about the experiences we've had as an accelerator and also with all the companies I've seen.
Hey guys, my name is Oskar. I'm running a games company, so not many ties in my life. I've been in the games industry for some 20+ years. I worked at Avalanche Studios, DICE, Rovio, and last year I founded a VR game developer in Stockholm. We are 11 people, and we're soon about to announce our games, so that's going to be exciting. So, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Denis, and I represent Fox 3D Entertainment. We are, let's say, so we are, our main business is art outsourcing. So we are art outsourcing studio, and we also game developers. So I'm like somewhere in the middle between wearing suit, and the tie, and hoodie jacket. And we are a big VR fan and VR enthusiast. So when we have available resources, we are making our own VR games. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, awesome. And I'm Sergey Doudy, as my brother Mike already said, from VR Association Russia. And I think it's quite cool that we have such an international panel here. So we have Russia and Sweden, Finland, Estonia. That's really great. So first off, we'll get started with a kind of warm-up question. So I want to hear from you guys your overall take on AR and VR markets currently, right now. Not what we see next year, what we see right now. And let's look at B2B and B2C together.
Well, so obviously, from some standpoints, the hardware numbers with VR might seem disappointing, but I'm looking at the curve, and we're still so early on. And if you compare it with, for example, how the PC came about in the 80s, I think looking at juxtaposing that curve with where we are with VR, I think we're doing fine. What's more important to me is that there's a very enthusiastic community of early users who are willing to spend a lot of money on good content, and I feel that what we need is more of that great content to drive, the adoption of the hardware as well. I'm super happy to see the recent price drops in hardware, which anecdotally, I know that has had a lot of my friends have, taken the leap and bought an Oculus or a Vive because the prices have come down. So I think there's too much panic around. I think we're still very early on, and the most important thing is to get people to try it and to keep developing and keep doing these experiences. And I'm not concerned.
I'm actually quite impressed by the sale so far, because if you look at the pricing on those things, it's a lot of money as a consumer to buy a thing that you might not even have tried. You just have a notion of what it could be. So I'm very impressed with how many high-end headsets that have been sold through. That's kind of the market we're looking at. Obviously, the pricing needs to come down. I mean, that's the key here for us to see a kind of kick into a hypergrowth. But it's gonna happen. It's just about timing. So yeah, I'm very positive for the future.
Yeah, I actually also think that there is a huge potential in VR, and the market still growing, because I think we are now waiting for Windows VR platform to come, and we see that PlayStation VR is doing very well, and they are planning to have, if I remember correctly, 2 million headsets by the end of the year, and mobile VR is also something like 7 million, I think, at the moment, and they're expecting to have 8 or 9 by the end of the year. So there is lots of possibilities for consumers to rather buy something, cheap to try what is VR all about, or maybe even go and buy something more expensive, which allows, like deeper and better immersion and graphics quality. And for example, PlayStation VR, I think now quite affordable comparing to HTC Vive, for example, and offers very, very good VR experience. So it's nice to see that market is developing and more players are appearing on the market. So that's very good.
And from the B2B perspective, because a lot of people are saying B2B is faring a lot better currently.
I think we have a really interesting situation right now if we speak about B2B market. Because as we all know, and we just mentioned it, customer penetration of head-mounted displays and even cardboards is quite low. But most of customers already know what virtual reality is. So they heard about it, but most of them never experienced it, have never experienced it. The price of HMD for business is really low. So almost any business can afford buying an HMD to use it in sales offices, for example. That's why businesses become the first touch points of virtual reality for usual customers. For example, if we speak about real estate sales, it happens that sales office of real estate developer becomes the first touch point for customers, their first experience in virtual reality. It's quite cool from the first point of view, but from the second point of view, it's not so cool, because as I saw yesterday and today, gaming companies, they are struggling to create a great experience, because you cannot have first experience. If your first experience of virtual reality is kind of low and you didn't like it, it makes a problem in the future. You might not be interested to buy HMD for home, for example. But companies who work in B2B and make pilots for business customers, they don't think about first experience. That's why, I'm sorry, but many pilots are literally made of like shit and bricks. And we give that experience to final customers. They wear it and they, ew, what was it? I had nausea. I didn't like what I had in Samsung Gear VR because I had like latency too high to enjoy that experience. So it's a really interesting and contradictory situation right now, and I hope that together we can cope with that. What I really hope that we can take the best experience and the best expertise from gaming industry and move it to B2B industry, because right now I see that that gap is growing because games are getting better and better, and business experiences are not getting better at all.
Okay, well, good thoughts, guys. So the next thing we want to talk about is monetization models, because clearly studios have to make money for there to be more content created and for B2C to really move forward. So we all know about different monetization models: premium subscription, we have freemium, we have in-app purchases, we have traditional ad-driven stuff. So I think this question gets asked at every panel that talks about monetization, so I want to ask you guys as well. What are your thoughts on these different models? What do you think the trend is? What do you think kind of the best approach is, and maybe some no-nos when considering what type of model to choose? And I think we're particularly looking at B2C mostly at this one.
I think as the market looks today, you have to launch basically a premium game because the volume is so small. You need to charge up front. I mean, you can possibly have IAPs in your game, but I think for you to make some money out of your game, you not only need to make a good game that stands out, but also you probably need to charge for it and be ready to charge for it. As the market grows, I think we're going to see a similar pattern as in mobile, where free-to-play is stepping in and taking a larger share of the market. I've said this before, I don't think free-to-play is going to be as dominant as in mobile, where it basically has eaten the whole market. I think we're going to see a portion of the market that still supports premium gaming VR, mostly down to the behaviors and how you play VR games, and that you often probably going to invest more time per session than in mobile. Yeah, that's my 5 cents.
I agree, because there's, the sort of pioneer consumers are willing to spend money on the good experiences, and I think you just, as a developer, you need to scope your projects according to, the still growing user base, which is still small, right? Yeah. So unless you get funding from one of the platforms, maybe it doesn't make sense to create a $10 million project. But, a 500K project to a €1 million project, for example, I mean, there's enough appetite in the market to support that if your experience is good. Then, what studios tend to do, if they don't find that traction in the consumer market, they might turn to the B2B markets, at least for outsourcing or short-term gigs. So, I mean, but I think the key is somebody said you need to be in cockroach mode. You need to sort of control your costs and just recognize the fact that it's not $1 billion business for you, most likely yet. But if you're smart, you can still make money with it.
Yeah, when I also speak to VR developers who are asking for our opinion about how to monetize games and how to earn money with VR experience they are creating, I usually try to encourage them, as they're pioneers. They're using very new technology, very promising technology. I also try to encourage them to maybe think up some good monetizations idea, which probably not so widely available or widely being used on the mobile market, for example, but which suit very well for the VR games and VR experiences. For example, if we are speaking about immersion, which VR allows us, and we can develop the environment around us, which is very similar to what we see in real life. So this is a very good way, for example, for branded products or for putting some product placements inside the game or VR experience they're creating. And thanks God, there are now some companies who are offering such kind of solutions, and we can see them even here. So I think like branded games or product placements inside your VR game, they should work well, I hope. Another thing, I think some money can also come from investors or maybe from the industry. If we're speaking about like educational application of VR games you are making, or maybe if it's somehow can help some companies, for example, to do staff training and such kind of things. So you can think up some very interesting projects which you can later sell to companies who may need it. So it's like type of business-to-business solutions. And how we also made one of our title profitable, we sold the license for one of our VR games, House of Languages VR, to VR headsets manufacturer from China. So this is also a good approach. We see that there are some other companies who are also making VR headsets and bringing them to the market. So sometimes they need probably exclusive titles which they can demonstrate on their own VR headsets, or maybe there are another platforms like in Asia, for example, they have their own platforms for games distribution. So there is always a chance to license the game or VR experience you have. So so probably developers have to speak more to potential partners, customers, find new markets for the things they are doing, and that's how they can benefit.
Yeah, I guess while labeling is also another thing that, well, you can't always do that considering if you have an in-house game or whatnot, but in some solutions that may make sense. So Alexey, what about in your case?
I personally have a prominent background in digital marketing. I worked there for 11 years. And when we discussed that, it reminds me, you can imagine a conference in 2002 where people 15 years ago were discussing how will we monetize websites. If we now look at that question 15 years later, we understand that there is a huge number of different monetization models, because there is no such unified segment as websites. Website is just a media which allows us to make business through via internet or mobile web, etc. VR is going to grow into the same type of media which allows us to monetize in different ways. But we, as developers, have the main question: how to survive until it grows up enough to give enough food for us all. And today, in that terms of survival, as I see, B2B and B2G is something that has money. But the problem is that all those types of companies are totally unscalable. So now we are inside of that contradiction. If we want to scale, if we want to grow into a unicorn, we need users reach. We need enough users to communicate with and to earn money on that communication. But we don't have enough users. That's why we have to work with businesses. But when we work with businesses, we cannot scale. And how to live through that situation, I don't know the answer. If we are talking about business, of course, first of all, the first idea which comes to our mind is outsourcing. Outsourcing for big businesses, of course, is cool. And you can get money right now, and you can get millions of dollars right now. But the problem is that you cannot scale what you create. So you get your $1 million right now, and you don't have an opportunity to grow, or it's quite hard to do. But if you are planning to create a new advertising platform, you are struggling to get users reach or to get investors money which wants you to show traction. And how are you going to show traction if you can't acquire users? It's a big problem. But I think that today we have to earn money on where we can do that. So work with businesses and try to grow platforms from custom experiences we create. But we have to think what VR as media allows us to do except just selling our developers hours. For example, I think that 3D modeling for VR is pretty interesting because when we are talking about VR and AR, we understand that somehow we have to make that transition from real objects of our real world, which is around us, into the virtual world. And the problem is that we don't have those models. And right now we cannot use photogrammetry to put real objects into the virtual world. That's why we will need much more in tens or thousands more models, and it means that we need more 3D modelers to do that, and we don't have them. And that might be another point, so like creating kind of sketchfab, but for VR models, which is focused only on VR. Or, I don't know, thinking about like new experiences which were never done before and start selling it into the business niches. For example, there is a huge niche right now, a huge segment, is creating skills, learning and training for manufacturers, for big businesses. There is no platform right now to provide that type of trainings. Many companies are struggling to create that. For example, Cerebrum in Russia is also working on it, and other companies in other countries. But there is a big market right now. I think that we have something else, but it's the first what came to my mind. Real estate, where we work and where we have a scalable platform, it's not taken. There is a huge market to work on it. So I think that the question you should ask yourselves right now, how am I gonna survive for next 3 years before I can create some scalable experiences because of better users reach? Okay,
well, let's say you have in-app purchases, etc. And Harri, for you, it'd be interested to hear it from you, from your teams in Nordic VR startups, for example. How do you create a payment system in virtual space that's secure and seamless? Because I know even I have friends who are still scared of purchasing stuff on their mobile phones. They still go to desktop. How do we convince those people to do this in virtual space?
I'm not sure if content creators want to solve that problem, or is that something for the distribution platforms to take care of. But just going back quickly, if you want to do money with your product right now, stay away from mobile VR, because there's no money there. If you want to do money with your product right now, you need to go high end. And I would say that almost applies to B2B as well, because the experience is so much better. In terms of like, there are probably people thinking about like how to solve, payments in VR, payments in AR. I would suspect that as somebody who works in the gaming space mostly, and like Oskar, I think we're better off leaving that to platforms like Viveport and Steam and Oculus to figure that out. There's so much fraud out there in the digital world, so I'm not sure if developers want to tackle that problem quite honestly.
I mean, that makes sense, but always curious to see if people have any thoughts on how do you make the process seamless, or how would Viveport make the process seamless?
No, I kind of agree. It needs to be sold through the digital stores, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see something there very, very soon. So I think you know, it's going to come that way. I don't think it makes sense for the game developers to start building that right now. I mean, we saw that in the early days of mobile and in the early days of free-to-play on PC, and it was just a mess. I mean, I worked in free-to-play back at EA on Battlefield Heroes, and we spent so much time on billing systems, fraud, just getting payment methods for all the territory. It was a pain, and we don't want to go there again.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Well, let's switch gears to content now, because most of you guys are doing content, clearly. So excluding like early adapters of new technology, people who are already into VR gaming, considering there's still not a whole lot of super amazing content, like how do we convince people to get in and try? Like, what are your thoughts on getting those people who are maybe new to the thing to come in and just give that for a shot?
I'd mirror Alexey's comments here that the first experience needs to be amazing, and that's a challenge. There's the friction, and I think maybe VR arcades might be a big part of this, since we have one arcade operator in our first batch of companies, and they see consumers from as young as 5-6-year-olds to I think they had a 90-year-old person just visit their arcade and be blown away by some of the content on the Vive. So I feel we really need to make sure that the content that they experience for the first time is mind-blowing. And I wouldn't agree that we don't have great content. I feel that there's a lot of good content out there, especially some of the new stuff on Oculus is I mean, obviously great. But how do we get people? That's a good question. Like, how do we eliminate the friction of trying it out for the first time and having an amazing experience?
Because I think sometimes I meet people and I ask them, hey, so have you tried VR? And they're like, well, I'm not really sure about putting this thing on my head, and so there's still kind of this cold feeling about VR in some circles, and the question is, how do you break that cold feeling and create it and make it become mainstream, more or less?
Well, I believe in amusement parks and VR parks and VR theaters because they can provide curated content with best experiences in the offline places where people come to entertain themselves. I think that should be a growing point and a tipping point of that hockey stick. I believe in that because we can remember. I think it was more than 20 years ago when people, I'm remembering Russia, when people didn't have VHS players. And we had a VHS theaters where you could go and watch a VHS cassette or a movie on a VHS. And after that, people could afford buying VHS player for themselves. And I think we're gonna see the same in VR. And I believe that gaming experiences and experiences which are curated for VR movie theaters are the answer.
Yeah, I agree. Arcades and showrooms have a big role to play here, I think. Maybe I'm optimistic, but I think VR is so good for learning and teaching. So I'm kind of hoping that schools could pick it up fairly quickly because it's not that much of an investment for them as well. I mean, you talked about for businesses it's a no-brainer, but for schools it's like the price of 2 iPads or something. And a lot of schools have iPads today. So hopefully we're going to see like kids starting to experience good VR as well.
Actually, from personal experience, even my brother and I were at the Moscow Educational Forum a few weeks ago, and this is not a VR AR convention at all, but we see that there's many applications of VR, from labs, like chemistry labs, to space, to everything. So you're absolutely right on the educational front.
It's difficult to add something here. I also think that such called VR cafes, for example, or VR arcades, I see that more and more of them are being opened, and that can bring a lot of people, I think, into VR. I also think that this idea of bringing VR to schools will make children familiar with VR stuff, and probably that will also bring VR to their houses. So yes, that's probably the best approach to make consumers familiar with VR, and lots of interesting content will also help to improve.
Okay, makes sense. And you guys already mentioned the impact of hardware prices on consumer, I guess, jumping into all this stuff. So we all know about Microsoft's mixed reality headsets that are going to be coming out. They still seem to be more VR oriented, of course. But you'll have HP, Dell, Acer, Lenovo, Asus all creating these headsets. So are you guys making any bets on this new wave of sort of mid-high end tech, and from a content creator perspective? I think the initial release should be end of this year, is what Microsoft is aiming for.
We've been trying to acquire those actually, and we're going to get a few. Seem to be in very short supply for some reason. I found it very encouraging that they're going to support in one shape or form Steam VR as well. That's really good news. I'm a bit concerned about, again, the fragmentation of the hardware. It's usually for a developer that might not be great news. But we'll see what happens. I mean, inside-out tracking, I haven't even tried it. Hopefully somebody has tried it.
Neither have I. Sounds cool.
but if it works, then it eliminates one of the friction points, which is setting up the whole thing, and especially with the Vives, and it takes time. So if they can solve that, then, and another thing, I was just bashing mobile VR, but I'm actually interested in seeing if Oculus comes out with the standalone thing that's going to be around maybe $200. We'll see what happens at Oculus Connect, but that might be another hardware innovation that drives forward the market.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think more players getting into this game is always good, and the pricing seems quite competitive. But we really need to get down to $1,000 or sorry, $100 or $200 before we really start to see great growth there. I think what's interesting, what you mentioned, is inside-out tracking. I mean, we use them a bit, and I know we haven't tried it, but I know some developers that actually have tried, since they are quite they don't have as much installation, obviously. Yeah. So if you put a laptop in your bag, you can actually be totally free. Right. With your Microsoft headsets. You can actually be running around on a baseball field, for example, and that's quite interesting to play around with ideas that are when you're that free. Basically, it's a kind of a new experience. But yeah, definitely good to see Microsoft putting the bucks behind them and investing in the space.
And one more thing, I know from just kind of reading and researching, the hardware requirements to drive the Windows sets are supposed to be a lot lower than for Vive or for Oculus. So even with integrated video cards, there's a chance to get the experience, which is really great.
Right now, prices of HMDs is not an issue for business solutions. And I would say that HMDs that you've mentioned are not the solution to business problems.
Agreed.
We need HMDs like HTC Vive, but without cords and with possibility to move on the square of 10 times 10 meters. And we don't have anything like that for now with that latency time, because solutions I saw, they do not get that plank. So that's what we are waiting for. We started using HTC Vive with TPcast. I don't know if you've heard about it, which is connected via Wi-Fi with a computer. It's pretty good, but it shows higher latency time, but we are waiting. Vive, they announced that they will have the room scale HTC Vive without cords, but I'm not sure. We are really waiting for it. But it's interesting that if we are talking about platforms like standalone Daydream VR, it might be an interesting solution to sell luxurious goods or expensive goods. I remember that, for example, people who were selling expensive villas in, I don't know, in Arab countries or somewhere else, they could make an iPad with a presentation as a gift. Mm-hmm. So I think it's not a long time until you can give a standalone Daydream helmet as a gift. Why not? But as I said, the first thing everybody waits right now, as I know from my colleagues, is good HMD, which works on WiGig, the new standard.
Okay, yeah, thanks for input. And pretty soon I'm going to open up the floor to you guys, so start thinking of some questions. I'm going to be randomly picking on people. But one last question for you guys. This is more of a fun imagination question. So have anyone of you read Ready Player One yet? Okay, what about you guys? Yes. All right. So as far as consumer awareness, that's one of the really key things to help move everything forward. Spielberg is coming out with a Ready Player One movie, Hollywood. This should really supposedly help raise consumer awareness. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? Can it actually help?
I need to take this because I asked the exact same question at our DevCon panel from Oskar and those guys, and Callum just fucking killed me with that. He's like, dude, it's a movie. It's not gonna make a difference. But I sort of disagree because, you know, Paul Morlacki said himself that Ready Player One was a major influencer in him building the Oculus. For me, I'm a bit older than him. For me, it's probably like Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, which was the first like, oh my God, is this really possible? And now obviously Ready Player One is nowhere near that quality as a book. I really like Snow Crash. But Ready Player One was cool. I hope it does really well. I hope it's gonna open, like, you know, people who haven't tried VR, maybe they'll get something out of it. But eventually, it's still an entertainment product. It's a movie. It's not gonna make or break this industry here, I don't think.
Any other notes?
No, I kind of agree. I mean, it's still a movie, and I think consumer awareness of VR is fairly good. I mean, they know about the concept. A lot of people know about the concept, and they haven't tried it. Yeah, that's the problem. And I'm not sure that the people that want to go see Ready Player One have not heard about VR. Like it seems like the same audience to me anyway. So yeah, I'm not sure it's going to make a big difference.
Okay. Well, one thing I was looking at a while back when Fast and the Furious came out in the U.S. when I was living there, you know, 'cause prices for all the Honda Civics and Integras and Toyota Supras just soared after that. So you never know. Maybe it can help. So, okay, so guys, I want to hear a few questions from you. This gentleman. I think we have a microphone. That'll be this man.
Yeah, I was thinking about the VR arcade, and I was thinking, is it even legal if I would rent a space and like buy the most expensive VR device and like all of the games and start charging people?
I think from a licensing
licensing
perspective.
And like copyright issues.
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that you would need some kind of license, both from on the content point of view, but maybe even from the hardware providers. I don't know. I mean, you know more.
I don't think from a hardware perspective. I think you can just buy the hardware. So Steam has a licensing model now for VR games at least, and HTC Viveport has one as well for developers, so you can give out these monthly licenses. But what a lot of developers actually do, and what a lot of the arcades want to do, is do direct deals with developers as well. And some of the arcades are looking for, I think you were talking about curated experiences, so they might not even want the full game. As it stands, they might want like a 20-minute slice of it with not as many menus, which is very streamlined experience, so you can like just put the headset on and start playing. So I think at least Raw Data, which is one of the more popular games on the Vive, a shooter game, I think they have a separate arcade build that they do deals directly with arcades and you know, have a licensing deal there. But obviously there's bound to be a lot of arcades that aren't strictly doing it legally, are just downloading stuff. And there's also a lot of arcades that only use free content as their content base.
Yeah, actually, from personal experience, my brother and I were doing interviews of arcades in the U.S., and we've heard many times about arcades putting each other out of business because somebody is not paying for licensing at all, and just, you know, so yeah. Any other questions?
I could just connect that.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Also, I think when it comes to arcades, at least when I've been spoken to many of the Chinese providers, they're really looking for multiplayer content. Yeah. Like that's what they're after, not so much the single player. Even if you have a short 5-10 minute slice of single player content, it's not that interesting. They want something where you can play cooperatively or play versus, basically. Yeah.
And also, like, well, there's the Void, which is this massive experience that's a mixed reality experience in the States. But they're looking for, I think, in Munich, they have Holo Cafe, where they have blended the physical world a little bit. They have some obstacles in the game. So they're also looking for, like, really custom content to those ones. Another thing about arcades, which is interesting, they're able to gather a lot of data on players, like what games are they playing, how are they playing it. One of our teams, EvoCat, is actually working with Pixely Arcade, who's also a company with us, and they have a beta out in one of the arcades, and they're actually doing a questionnaire for the gamers after they played the session, like just a few questions on an iPad. How did you like this and this? So it might be actually, you know, sort of like you have in the mobile world, the soft launch or whatnot. You know, you can have the arcades as sort of test beds for certain types of content.
Cool. So, any other question, guys? All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for your time. I want to have a big thanks for Alexey, for Harri, for Oskar, for Denise, for coming out and sharing your valuable input. So let's have a big round of applause for these guys.
Thanks.